despite all the things they report, they find, they study, somehow still have this overwhelming sense of hope or optimism. You are obviously the exception here. But
Yes.
I find fascinating that in the face of really awful information that they come up with and that they study, they are optimistic. I don't know if you knew Steven Schneider, the late Steve Schneider.
I did not. I never met him. Of course, I
Okay.
know about him.
And you probably know Terry Root, though, do you?
Yes.
So, they were married. I knew them for years, and they were married, and I was once visiting them in the Bay Area. We were walking on a beach, and Terry told me the story of when Steve was in the hospital with cancer, and he's in the hospital room asleep, and she's sitting there by his side, and an oncology nurse comes in and asks what she does, and she says, I'm a biologist. I study endangered species harmed by climate change. And the oncology nurse looks at her and says, "What a depressing job." She did this in laughs because, of course, it's an oncology nurse, but she does it in laughs because she is not a depressive nurse. You, on the other hand, you see all the bad and seem to, I don't know, you don't have this, at least you don't project this hope.
Well, no. In fact, if you look at the definition of hope, it's basically wishful thinking. And so I think hope is a lie that we've been sold by the dominant narrative, by the culture, so that we always wish for a better future, which in my opinion is a lot like wishing for a different past, which is the Grief Recovery Institute's definition of grief, wishing for a different past. And I think wishing for a certain future, almost always a better future, that's hope. And I think that they're two sides of the misinformed coin.
When I talk to them, the reason I talk, many of them, people like Kim Cobb at Georgia Tech, or Jacqueline Gill at the University of Maine, they say they have hope because they see that action still can make a difference. You do not, I said.
No. I agree completely. Actions make a tremendous difference at the level of our individual lives with the people we interact with on a daily basis. One of my superheroes in this world is a woman you've never heard of. Her name is Mimi Gurman. She lives in Portland, Oregon, and she used to be an anti-nuclear activist. And she figured out, based on my work, that we don't have 40 or 50 or 60 years to safely decommission nuclear power plants. So what we do with our activism must be rooted in the people we interact with today. What we do in our lives must be rooted in the here and the now. And so she switched from being an anti-nuclear activist to being an activist for the houseless, for what most people call the homeless. And that's how she spends essentially all of her waking hours when she's not making enough money to pay the rent, which she does through massage therapy. And I recognize her as one of the relatively few people who I have influenced in a positive manner. Now, I continue to work too. I'm a huge fan, for example, of the Mere Reflection framework put together by Dr. Ye Tao. And I think it's too late for it to work, but I'm not going to give up on that idea. In addition, I'm trying to do what many reporters say they're doing, but are not doing very well. Tom Hartman comes to mind as somebody who used to understand and report on things like peak oil. He wrote one of the early books on the topic, and the Last Rays of Ancient Sunshine, I think it was called. And he had me on his show years ago in an episode that he call it Conversations with Great Minds. And then more recently, he's done nothing but have Michael Mann on the show once a week or so, just to point out what a terrible, horrible person I am. I don't know where that comes from, but Michael Mann has a history of a couple of things that are relevant here.
Well, I was going to ask you about it because, in his latest book, he goes, I did talk to Michael Mann for this because Mike is, still is an optimistic person. And he now says the fight over doomism is worse than the fight over denialism. He says doomism, like what you put out, and he mentions you specifically.
Of course he does. Every chance he gets.
He says it's more dangerous than denialism.
Yeah, he libeled me in the Washington Post, too.
So what do you say to that?
What I say publicly is I make a joke. It's all I can do. I had an attorney who was working pro bono on my behalf against people like Michael Mann and David Wallace Wells, who stole my work and clearly plagiarized it, made a lot of money in the process. And the attorney slipped on a dock in the Bahamas and died. So what I have remaining in my life is a wonderful woman, my partner, the love of a few people, and integrity. That's what I have. That's what I will have till the end, because I'm dedicated to retaining those things.
So, you said so what's left in response to a man is a joke. Do you mind sharing the joke?
No, in the Washington Post article, he called me a doomist cult hero.
Right.
So when I was allowed to tour, those days are behind me now due to a coordinated defamation campaign. But when I would tour, every presentation, after he wrote that, I would point out that he was wrong. I'm not a doomist cult hero. I'm a doomist cult superhero. That's all I got.
That's pretty funny.
And this is what I have in my life, is the ability to make jokes, maybe influence a few people, maybe encourage people to live like Mimi Gurman does and like my partner and I do, live in the here and the now and positively influence the lives of the people we come into contact with. Other than that, I try to inform people, just like Tom Hartman claims he intends to inform people. But I do so with the facts, with the actual evidence that almost everybody ignores, including the corporate media.
So when I talk to all the IPCC authors, they say, look, it is horrible, but there isn't a cliff. It isn't a 2026, no more humans. It is a increasingly difficult and dangerous and awful Earth, but it is not game over. Or as Jacqueline Gill at University of Maine says, climate is not pass fail.
Okay. According to 5 peer-reviewed papers by Professor Tim Garrett at the University of Utah, civilization is a heat engine. The first one of those was initially published in November 2009 by a dying man you already mentioned, Steve Schneider. He was the editor. And the outrage was immediate, and the paper was pulled from publication. Not because there was any error, but because civilization can't possibly be a bad thing from the perspective of academics, who are the consummate civilized beings. I spent a long time there. I know about that. So the paper was pulled for 14 months and finally published only because 2 research groups were allowed to respond in the same issue to that paper. But the responses were nothing. They didn't take issue with anything that Garrett concluded. They didn't take issue with the evidence. They just didn't want it to be true. And Garrett has gone on to publish 4 additional papers that point out the details regarding how civilization is a heat engine. I don't see anybody wanting to slow down or shut off civilization. The motto for those of us living within this set of living arrangements is simple. Must go faster. And that's what we keep doing. We just keep going faster toward the what some people refuse to call a cliff.
So, and I know you can hear this all the time, but there is a great history, a long history of people preaching doom and end of the world, whether they have PhDs or not, and yet we persist. Why is what you're saying different?
Well, one, it's rooted in evidence, not in religious thinking. Two, there are at least 7 species in the genus Homo that have already gone extinct. I strongly suspect a few of those individuals, at the end of their run, were saying things like, "We're too clever. This couldn't possibly happen to us." Yes, other species go extinct. In fact, for all of those species, as with Homo sapiens, the Homo in question was driving many of those species to extinction. And we have quite a long history of doing that ourselves. To think that we could not go extinct because we're, quote, too clever is ridiculous and astonishing. As we speak, vertebrates are outstripping, the rate of environmental change is outstripping the ability of vertebrates to keep up by a factor of 10,000 times. Environmental change is outstripping the ability of mammals to keep up as well. We are vertebrate mammals. So this tells me that we might fall into the same category as the other vertebrate mammals on the planet. Another reason that people have for hope that doesn't plague me is they have children. How Michael Mann, who first wrote about the hockey stick in 1998 in Nature, how he could then, years later, have a child is beyond me. He's writing about exponential change. He's writing about the hockey stick in 1998, and now he's got a 14-year-old, 15-year-old daughter. Are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind?
He says, yes, it's warming, but one, if you look at it, the rate of emissions is slowed, and if you look at Paris pledges, it looks to peak around 2.7 degrees Celsius, which is certainly higher than anyone wants it, but it is not the 5.2 in some of the papers that you cite. In fact, it's about half of the 5.2.
Right. And to think that a particular number matters is utter hubris. What matters is the rate of environmental change. Any conservation biologist and any ecologist knows that the rate of environmental change is the premier factor that we are tinkering with at our own peril. It's that rate of environmental change that is driving all those species to extinction. It was the rate of environmental change that drove those at least 7 species in the genus Homo to extinction. It's that rate of environmental change that is outstripping the ability of vertebrates and mammals to keep up. It's the rate of environmental change that matters. Conservation biologists and ecologists know this, and engineers and planetary scientists seem to lack an understanding of the exponential function.
So what happens in 2027 if you're wrong?
I will be among the happiest people on earth. People think that I'm gaining some sort of privilege by compiling, organizing, synthesizing, and then regurgitating the evidence produced by other people. I enjoy no such privilege. None. I haven't earned a paycheck for nearly 13 years. I'm doing what I'm doing because what I'm doing is rooted in evidence, not because it affords me any privilege at all. I have lost virtually every relationship in my life. My dad died in July of 2020 thinking I was a horrible person. My siblings and my mother still think the same thing.
Um, and I'm so sorry to hear that. That must be awful. And yet you persist in doing this. You're isolated by it. The pressure to say, okay, let's have hope. Maybe I'm wrong, must be out there. What? So let me turn to you the same way. I wonder how these people can be so optimistic. In the face of all this, how can you be this way since it is so isolating and so hurtful to you? How do you persist in doing this?
I am committed to the truth, not to any particular future. I'm committed to compiling the evidence, no matter how it leads, no matter what direction it goes. When I was in graduate school, I was taught that's what scientists do. Apparently, that's not what scientists do, at least not all scientists. You know, I'm reminded of a line by John Kenneth Galbraith in his 1977 book, The Age of Uncertainty. This from page 22. People of privilege will always risk their complete destruction rather than surrender any material part of their advantage. That's almost every paid climate scientist I know.
In terms of one of the fear, and this is one of the things Matt has said and others, is that if you give up and are paralyzed into inaction, then you guarantee the horrible future that you talk about. Why not fight it?
So this is what the people say who claim I've given up, right? That I've somehow given up. Have any of the, I opted out of the monetary system when I realized it was driving us to extinction. I quit working for pay because I realized that money is what matters negatively. That's why I haven't earned a paycheck for nearly 13 years. Ask Michael Mann how much money he's given up lately. How much of his, $250,000 salary that he spends on any cause besides his own, besides flying around back and forth to Australia, spending time on his teenage daughter, and so on. When I realized it was the monetary system driving us to extinction, I opted out of the monetary system. I lived off-grid for 10 years. Do you know any paid climate scientist or any paid corporate media figure who has lived off-grid for 10 years? Of course you don't. Nobody does that. That's too hard. That is too difficult for these people.
What their response would be, to be honest, and I don't mean to insult you, but they would say, someone who has lived off the grid for 10, 13 years, whether they say what you say, are a right-wing, survivalist, they're crazy. So, I mean...
So here's why I did what I did. I moved off-grid because I realized it was the monetary system and driving to extinction. I didn't know how to grow food. I didn't know how to build anything. But I created this $1 million homestead. Yes, I spent all my money on it. That's why I don't have any money anymore. I spent all of my retirement funds building this homestead and learning how to raise and milk goats and make cheese. I became a master cheese baker. I built structures so that I could minimize my carbon footprint. Pure and simple. That's a bad thing? Now that makes me crazy because I recognized it was the monetary system driving us to extinction, so I opted out of the monetary system. That's what makes me crazy? Yes, that's exactly the response I expect from that asshole Michael Mann. You can tell him that if you'd like. You can put it in print. He's an asshole because he thinks my making sacrifices is crazy. This from a man who has never made a sacrifice in his entire goddamn life.
At the same time, another climate scientist, Kim Cobb at Georgia Tech, does make these sacrifices. She refuses to fly anywhere. She bicycles to work every day. She raises her family, 4 kids. Yes, I know what you think about kids. She raises her family of 4 kids, and they are self-sufficient in energy with solar power. They are like you, off the grid in a way. they're not off monetary system, and she practices what she preaches. She's vegan. Her carbon footprint is minimalized. Yet at the same time, she talks about hope and how she uses what she does as an example how you can change the world. And in some ways, you are both minimizing your carbon footprint, but with a different message. Hers is see what you can do, and yours is it's over.
No, mine is see what you can do at the individual level, here and now. I'm not saying anything is over. I live for today. I live for the relationships in my life. And I was 19 years old in 1979 when I decided not to have children because I could see exactly where we were going. And where we were going in 1979, as was clear to anybody paying attention, was to utter disaster. Remember when people read the 1972 Limits to Growth from the Club of Rome? Remember those days? Nobody does that anymore. I haven't heard about the Club of Rome. I haven't heard about limits to growth for 40 years. But I still know about it. I still know there are limits to growth. I still know that we have exceeded those limits on many fronts. I know that there are too many people on the planet, at least too many rich people, as Paul Ehrlich puts it. Too many people spending too much. So I choose not to do that. Again, this doesn't make me a crazy man. It doesn't make Kim Cobb a crazy woman. To try to do what we can here and now is what we can do. I obviously wouldn't have 4 children or any. I was married to the youngest of 6 Catholic children from the Midwest for 32 years, 10 months, and 17 days. And we didn't have children because we both knew where that leads, where it had already led, which is too many people on an overconsumptive planet. So whereas other people talk about making sacrifices like riding their bicycle to work, I've actually made sacrifices. Whereas Michael Mann talks about sacrifices other people can make, I've actually made all of those sacrifices for an extended period of time. It's only when I found out the full effects of the aerosol masking effect that I decided living off-grid wasn't such a swift idea after all. That in fact, if we all did that, we would have already been extinct. Had people followed my lead way back when, we would have driven such a rapid rate of environmental change that we wouldn't be here now.
So, okay, the other part of this is, yes, individual changes, especially to your own carbon footprint, matter. However, bigger changes, as you point out, it is systemic issues, which is how we're in this mess of climate change, right?
Absolutely.
So, if you accept that, there are many who say that if it's a systemic change, change the system. In other words, vote the bastards out is what some would call it. Get in governments that do something.
Yes, I'm a huge fan.
Okay.
That's why I haven't voted or even registered to vote in the last 5 states I lived in.
But if you're saying you're a huge fan of changing the system and you don't vote, how do those two jive?
The two-party system we have in the United States, well, I call those two parties the twin cheeks of the corporate ass. You think voting Democratic is going to fix anything? I don't see that making any big changes. In fact, it was Barack Obama, shortly after he was elected, who said he wasn't going to change anything if it meant endangering the monetary system, endangering economic growth. So, I'm a
We do 5 elections.
sorry.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard that right. It's 5 elections you haven't voted in, right?
No, it's the last 5 states I lived in. I haven't registered to vote.
Sorry, how many times? When was the last time you voted?
I don't recall. It's been that long. I know I used to vote Democratic, because that's what my family did, and so I was pretty committed. But I was pretty heavily influenced by Southwestern writer Edward Abbey, the desert anarchist. And so somewhere along the line, I became convinced that anarchism, which is real democracy, was a better idea than the version of so-called democracy that we have in this country. So I stopped pursuing the two-party system.
But okay, I did read your column, which I honestly take that was in jest, and however, a man in his books takes it as a evidence that you are being backed by denialists.
Right. He routinely says that I'm being supported by fossil fuel industries. Routinely. And if Gerald Maples hadn't slipped on a dock in the Bahamas, Michael Mann would be in court over that kind of statement right now. And so would David Wallace Wells, for that matter. Yes. You think any of them are going to work with me? Of course not. Because the only one who has made that brave decision died. I've been looking for an attorney. At that point, I'd been looking for an attorney for 10 years. I'm still looking. Nobody's stepping forward.
So it is, just for the record, do you want to say you aren't funded by fossil fuel industries?
The very idea that I'm funded by anybody, much less fossil fuel industries, is insane. I have not received a paycheck of any kind for nearly 13 years, and that certainly includes the fossil fuel industries. You know, the attorney who was working with me, Gerald Maples, became famous for filing suit against more than 100 fossil fuel industries in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. And that matches my feelings as well. I am no fan of the fossil fuel industries. In fact, Gerald Maples at the time pointed out that the soccer mom taking her kids to practice can do very little about climate change. However, there are organizations and CEOs and individuals who actually can make a difference. And that's what he was pointing to, and that's what I'm pointing to as well, is those industries that can make a difference and are choosing not to, or are choosing to make a difference in the wrong direction to preserve their own privilege.
So then why not work to change those individuals and industries?
Tell me how I can do anything at this point. I have been defamed to the point of being disappeared. I am nobody. Nobody listens to me anymore. Last time I toured was many years ago. I was warned by somebody who claimed to be an NSA contracted spy in December of 2016 that things were about to get a lot worse for me. And sure enough, 8 months later, I was removed from public view completely. What do you want me to do? I'm doing what I always do, which is submit to essentially every interview that comes along. I still crank out 2 videos every week trying to inform people about what's going on in the world. This is what I have at my disposal. I've written, 16 or 18 books, several of them about climate change and the kinds of actions we can take. I'm doing what I can. I have no money. I'm not in a position of privilege. There are things that I cannot do. Michael Mann can do those things. Lots of other people can do the things that I'm no longer able to do.
Okay. And I don't mean to become confrontational. I'm just asking.
No, I understand. I understand perfectly well.
And so, just for the record, your column about voting for Trump to hasten the doom, to hasten the end, was that?
No. I do not want to hasten the end. When I found out the full effects of the aerosol masking effect, and the latest paper I've seen on the topic was published June 15th of 2021 in Nature Communications. And it indicates that if we do manage to shut down this set of living arrangements, if we manage to terminate industrial civilization, then the warming will be an additional at least 1.1 degrees Celsius.
Right, yeah, because all the traditional
Right. And according to James Hansen, this will happen in 5 days. I'm not a fan. This is why I stopped living off-grid.
Weather patterns and more frequent extreme weather, most communities will adapt to varying degrees. There's no way in hell humans will go extinct by 2026.
That'd be great. No, and I'm serious. But we're on the warmest planet right now since the Eemian, which is before any civilizations arose. And the rapid rate of environmental change, the rapid rise in temperature resulting from the loss of Arctic ice or any number of other factors, I suspect will be enough to tip us over the edge so that we no longer have habitat for our species. I'd love to be wrong about that.
I guess here's where I get confused. And please explain to me. There's, sort of human habitat right now is very large, correct? It is, let's see, what is it? Earth is what percentage land, and then you take away the deserts and the...
Right, right. So the arable land is probably around 10% or so, 8 to 10% of the planet.
Of the planet.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
It's still a huge amount.
yes, oh, absolutely, it is. And
There's a difference between degrading and losing, isn't there?
of course,
So, what it seems like in your assumptions, we go from 60 to 0, or 0 to 60, whichever way you want to put it. It's an all or nothing thing. You're saying it's binary. The habitat is here or it's not. When over the last century, we have seen habitat not be binary, but be a sliding spectrum of always worsening. There are very rare occasions habitat improving, but but almost always, as you know, habitat degrades, but it doesn't usually go from acceptable to non-livable.
well, we've been sliding off the...
How do we do that? How do you see us going from this large amount of arable land to nothing?
Well, we're already losing large areas of arable land. More than 5 million people die every year because of, quote, non-optimal temperatures. We are already losing habitat around the globe in tropical and subtropical areas for humans. And both of these conclusions are supported by peer-reviewed literature. So we have already begun sliding down that slippery slope of losing habitat for humans. At what point do we lose it all? I would like to think never. But I know better. All species go extinct. 99.5+% of the species that have occupied this planet have gone extinct. To think that we would not go extinct is ridiculous. How long did it take the San Benedicto rock wren to go extinct? Well, we don't really know because I believe it was 1952 when San Benedicto Island became volcanic and blew. But there was loss of habitat and therefore functional extinction for the San Benedicto rock wren, which could fly, by the way, within minutes after the volcano blew. And no additional San Benedicto rock wrens were ever reported once the volcano blew. So sometime between a matter of minutes and a matter of weeks, the species went extinct. Many other species have gone extinct very quickly upon losing habitat. Could we do that? Of course. I never hear anybody say that. Of course we could go extinct when we lose habitat. Of course we will. Of course we will go extinct.
We'll never go extinct, but they're not arguing we'll go extinct in 2026.
Right. And I'm not nearly as stuck on 2026 as I used to be, although if we lose habitat in 2023 or 2024, then as McKinnon and Anderson claim that we will, then yes, we will be extinct by then. 2030, game over. I don't care if you are living in a bunker underneath Antarctica, because a relatively short period of that kind of life is going to cause you to, one, kill everybody around you because they're so annoying, and then kill yourself because you're so annoying. And I mean, I just don't see humans living underground or in a bunker for an extended period of time. And I pursued that, quote, bunker life myself to try to extend my own life and the life of the people around me. And then I became aware of aerosol masking. And I was reminded of what happens when the nuclear power plants melt down and they strip away the stratospheric ozone, as remarkably accurately depicted in the 2021 film Finch. Have you seen it?
No.
It's wonderful. It stars Tom Hanks. I'm not a big Tom Hanks fan, whatever. It stars him and a robot, and the robot becomes more human over time. And it's an excellent depiction of what happens when we lose this set of living arrangements, when industrial civilization goes away and the nuclear power plants melt down as a result.
All right. I truly appreciate this. Thank you so much for talking with me. I have no idea. My story, I'm hoping to get it done in the next week or so. But actually, I'm talking later this afternoon with my editors, and we're planning it. The initial idea is to work around the upcoming IPCC Working Group 3 report that comes out Monday. But we're still doing planning, and like I said, it's probably 1 or 2 stories, and once it's out, I will let you know and send you a link.
That would be great. Thank you.
I'm never as good as remembering as I tried to. I try to be perfect, and I always fail. So I will try. I can't guarantee I'll succeed. But thank you so much for talking.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Remember that I'm reminded of a line by Barnum, P.T. Barnum.
Yes.
I don't care what the newspapers say about me as long as they spell my name right.
Well, actually, I love P.T. Barnum, one of my favorite Broadway musicals of all time.
Well, and that's pretty much my position at this point, because I've been so destroyed in terms of my public life, that for anybody to write anything, including my name, indicates that somebody might actually pay attention to my work, which would be nice.
All right. Well, I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.